When I leave, very seldom wash my hands, and I never had time to go wash my hands. Is that one of your organizations?
It is actually one of the organizations that we fund.
Okay.
Their job at the very beginning.
Just in the way?
No, it's project leadership. They do, they would, they're.
I know, I'm getting so many assignments on it.
So Delaware County, out of the 2 counties in the state, at one time was the highest sign on their child. So I mean, I've got.
Like, I'm happy to feel free to let me pick.
Well, I mean, it's not nice that they qualify, but it's nice. I know.
I noticed that.
Gonna say, that's good. Yeah.
And now, and so project leadership, it's Green County, Delaware County, so Green County.
Official now.
You know, I figured both have something, but, they're in there, so I was like, okay,
I think I should show them as I was.
I will say that if you still have one, I just did that. The one I had, and then two was for that. That one, that's the other one. Yeah.
I didn't see it until like we're talking more about it. Still.
But they just like didn't get to it.
Pretty cool. Yes.
I'm sure I have church and everything. Well, you know,
That was a lot. Josh, I'm just waiting for it. Yeah.
I say that's side by
Welcome back to the main meeting of the Indiana Commission for Higher Education. We'll now continue with our agenda. And we're going to have, now the legislative sessions behind us, we're going to have Josh and Greg provide us with an update of the 2023 session. If Josh is right.
All right, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to present on the last legislative update for this cycle before we go into, well, we already are in our implementation phase. but we'll start visiting that in a few months. This has unquestionably, in my 9 sessions, the most successful session we've had for higher education. By my count, we have roughly 25 new items to either implement or update. So maybe we were a little too successful on this year. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about what passed. We're not gonna cover what did not pass, just because we'll be pressed for time to cover these items. And then what we're gonna do for next steps to ensure that what we've been given the opportunity to do, we can do with fidelity. I think what you'll hear from Greg and from myself are ways that we are gonna address the issues that we've been talking about for the last year, and significant steps forward. So with that, unless the commission want to add something beforehand, I'll let Greg step up. He'll do the first half, and then I will cover 10:02 myself.
I do, very quickly, and to sort of state for the jury again, I said about our partners this morning at the 6 to 12 kind of thing, we have this sort of implied agreement. There's one exception in this room, that's Josh. He would probably say we have a 6 to 6 agreement, 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. To put a fine point on that, on the, well, it wasn't even night, the morning that the General Assembly decided to adjourn sine die, he was answering my text messages at 3:30 a.m. And I shared that. He probably will, tell me about this later because he won't want this public recognition. I don't know that I've worked with anybody who works any harder than Josh Garrison. And I meant that when I said he was answering text messages at 3:30 a.m. And they were substantive. They were substantive questions and detailed answers, and team did an amazing job. But now, but there you go.
Were you still at the State House at that hour?
What? No, I had gone home. I was home with my kids at that time, so.
Or you?
I was not. I was tuning in virtually.
Yeah. So one other thing I did want to address, it's not in the presentation, Commissioner Member Hubbard, you mentioned the general diploma bill that was passed this legislative session. And what that does, it stair steps down the percent that high schools can use general diploma towards a graduation rate. So right now, the statewide average for a general diploma is 9%. What happens in 2023, 2024 is that if your general diploma rate exceeds 9%, that comes off your overall graduation rate. So if you have a 97% graduation rate, but a 15% general diploma rate, you actually now have a 91% graduation rate. Going forward in 2024, 2025, it'll be 6%. So anything exceeding 6% will come off. And then in 25, 26, anything exceeding 3% will come off. So that was, just wanted to provide a quick update on that. That did.
Thank you.
Yep. And I'll hand it off to Greg for the first half.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Move the slides forward. I know that there have been several comments on just the historic nature of this year's legislative session, and it has been transformative in every way, which will be transformative to the work that we do at the Commission for Higher Education, the state of Indiana, and most importantly, Hoosier students. So to start things out, we always kind of lead off broadly and then move down into the bills. But as was discussed, the legislative session did adjourn sine die on Friday, April 28th at about 3 in the morning. And so although Josh and I were not there, we returned tuning in virtually to the session as it ended. So of the 1,154 bills that were filed this session, about 20% of those have made it to Governor Holcomb for signature. And 10 of those bills directly impact the work that we do at the Commission for Higher Education, which we will discuss during this presentation. So those 10 bills, I won't read through them, but are listed here. And so I'll be speaking about the first 9 of them and how they impact us at the Commission. And then Josh has put together a very impressive comprehensive analysis on House Enrolled Act 1002, and we'll be talking about that. So with that, we will start with Senate Enrolled Act 167, which was centered on the FAFSA. It will require FAFSA completion for high school seniors in the state of Indiana beginning with the class of 2024. So we were really excited to see, this become law this session. It's certainly a topic that we have been pushing for and advocating for years at the commission. And so what really got us to the finish line are some opt-out provisions that were included in an amendment during the second chamber of session. So those are defined as parents as well as students who are emancipated can opt out of filing the FAFSA. And in addition to that, high schools can waive the requirement after the April 15th deadline if the school has made 2 reasonable attempts to contact the parent and the student has still not filed the FAFSA. So this bill is going to be critically important. We've spoken before how the FAFSA is the gateway to financial aid, that being federal, state, and oftentimes even institutional and local dollars are linked up with the FAFSA. Here in Indiana, last year alone, we've noted before, about $70 million was left on the table by virtue of students simply not filing the FAFSA. So what was mentioned earlier, we now join 8 other states in the country who have universal FAFSA legislation. And we've seen some very positive results from peer states who have come a little bit before Indiana. Namely, a few examples I've used in the past: Texas and Alabama. Texas, just a few years ago, was 23rd in the country for the percent of their high school seniors completing the FAFSA, and they have since jumped to 5th as a result of their legislation. And then in a similar fashion in Alabama, they had moved from 34th to 9th. So last year, Indiana was, I believe, 40th, Josh, in our FAFSA completion. And so we're very excited to see the results of what this legislation is going to do and how it's going to move us forward in the state.
And as I will do, I have to, Greg. So on top of that, Louisiana did see enrollment increases based on that. But then the pandemic hit once these measures were enacted. So we're seeing the results from places like Texas come forward hopefully this summer, and we can learn from what they're doing. We're in the process of developing the opt-out waiver form. We are duplicating what Texas did. They did a really good job with their form for families, and we'll also make it available in ScholarTrack, our online system, to help high schools track who has and has not filed the FAFSA and who has opted out. This will also allow us to see schools with very high opt-out rates or very low opt-out rates to find out what they're doing well or not doing so well.
Thank you, Josh. The second bill moving forward is Senate Enrolled Act 384, which is Indiana's higher education Purple Star designation. Many will recall in the last meeting, we talked about this being our agency bill at the Commission for Higher Education for this legislative session. So we're very excited about this particular legislation, where the Purple Star designation will essentially be a way of better serving our veterans and military connected families, providing them with an enhanced support for pursuing a credential or ultimately finishing their degree. And so it would be a way by which, as well, to recognize our colleges and universities that are supportive and inclusive of veterans and their families. And I want to say a little bit credit to Dr. Stacy Townsley and her team, as well as Major General Erica Studerman for really kickstarting this work even before this bill was passed into law. And so them leading up the Veterans Education Pathway Task Force, they are creating the criteria by which we will form that designation. So the bill does require the commission to make that available by May 1st of 2024. I'm very excited that work is already moving forward really quickly. I believe they have a draft set of recommendations ready at this point, and I believe those will be presented in July. So,
one topic that we've talked about before around the credit for prior learning, and particularly for military service, and General Studerman had said that there's a pretty good pathway, I think, for the Air Force or Army, one of the branches, but not the other branches. Did that come up at all in any of this?
Yeah, I know it's one of the 3 focus areas of the Veterans Education Pathway Task Force, and one of the several pieces of enhanced support being considered for the designation. Yes.
Stacy's nodding, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. All right, Senate Enrolled Act 404, access to transcripts. So this bill does not necessarily provide a requirement of the Commission for Higher Education, but certainly Josh and I wanted to make mention of it during this presentation because we will be working with our institutions just for tracking the effectiveness of the legislation, which is centered on transcripts and requires not just our public colleges and universities, but also our proprietary or for-profit schools to provide a transcript to students under certain conditions, which I've outlined below. So the first is if a student owes no more than $1,000 and the student has paid to the institution at least $100 in the past year. And then secondly, if the student owes more than $1,000 and the student has paid the lesser of 10% of the debt or $300 in the past year, that public college, university, or proprietary school has to provide the transcript to the student. So wanted to, sorry, I thought Josh had a comment, but wanted to make mention of that bill as well. So Seth talked a little bit about the budget bill, apropos of Martin University and the College Success grants as well. And so I wanted to provide just a little bit more context on that. So the bill does appropriate $5 million to the commission for the upcoming biennium for grants to Martin. And just to give some additional context on that, those grants must be used to attract and also retain students into high demand professions. So I know there is a comprehensive list of that, and I know that the law enforcement, information technology, there are select criteria for that that are highlighted in 1001. And the release of the funding, as I believe Seth mentioned as well, is subject to the state budget committee approval in August.
Can I ask one thing? When I was reading that a couple of days ago, I was wondering with the commission's role in this, do we have to approve what they come forward with that specifically, attracts and retains students, or is that something that the budget committee is going to approve?
I might defer to Josh. on
State
that.
budget committee will ultimately approve it. We'll review it and we'll help make sure that it addresses what they're asking the legislation to do. We've already met with Martin on this issue. But we will have input on it, but the ultimate approval will be state budget.
Yeah, I was just curious as to whether we could provide them help. Given our heavy background with all these things that they could do that could be helpful to them.
Absolutely.
All right, sticking in House Enrolled Act 1001, but switching gears to the College Success Program. So in the same vein, you're looking at a $5 million appropriation during the upcoming biennium for college success programs. These funds must be used to increase the success of underrepresented minority students, first-generation students, and low-income students. It is specifically for four-year institutions eligible for this funding for the program.
So does that mean will be our staff roles, or will we be the ones assessing grant requests from the institutions, or both?
We'll be issuing a grant for the institutions to apply for. So we'll be reviewing
So we
those.
will not actually be doing things ourselves.
Correct. They would have the staff on their campus.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we will have input recommendations and we'll have parameters around what we want that to do. But yeah, it'll be a grant institution.
Great.
And I would just quickly add, we were really pleased with the language, the way this ended up. Yeah, it reflects to steal from the chancellor a little bit of just a while ago, talking about data that we wouldn't necessarily want to write home about, but that we need to talk about. And whether that's the college going rate or whether that's the completion rate and so forth for low income, Black students, Hispanic students, right? And this grant gets to that. And so we think we're going to be able to see, very hopefully too, some innovation in this space.
So I'm sorry. Indiana College Core, so how does that work?
And I had switched the slide from the College Success Program to the Indiana College.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I
But
thought I'd missed it.
no, you're fine.
He's just faster than I am.
Yeah.
It's not unusual.
So the third prong to House Enrolled Act 1001 that we wanted to mention, it delves into the K-12 space, but certainly impacts our work as well. And so we were pleased to see the academic performance grants in the bill as well. And so it provides school corporations with grant funding as a result of student completion of 3 different credentials or dual credit. So the school can receive funding for dual credit completion, $40 per credit hour for each student. $1,500 for the Indiana College Core, which is a block of 30 credit hours that transfer seamlessly between Indiana's public colleges and universities, and there are select privates that participate in that as well. And the students can earn essentially their first year of college in a fraction of the price. I think the average is about $750 for that. And so that is actually a big task.
So the public school gets the $1,500. Per kid.
High school, yeah.
Yeah, the high school.
Per student, yeah. And so the third piece is also applicable to associate degrees, and that's just slightly elevated by $1,000 to $2,500. So the school would get an aggregate of their students, but for each student, it's the highest threshold. So for example, if I earned $500 in dual credit, but also got the Indiana College Core, the school would receive the higher of the two, the $1,500, but they wouldn't receive both. Mhm.
And I sort of mentioned this in passing this morning, but this is again, one of those, I think the partnerships that are just so intentional these days. It shows through in this one. Secretary Jenner driving this, Speaker Houston driving this, the institutions leaning in, and then us being the commission coming around and saying, yeah, this is how this stuff should work. How do we help a student get there more quickly? We know statistically they have better success wherever they go. How are we doing those things in conjunction? This is, I think, one of the better examples. It kind of flies under the radar of what you see in the press, other things get more headlines, but that's a really good example.
Yeah.
Seth, the Indiana College Core, I'm trying to go back to when I was more familiar with this. There were some classes that I had to pay for my kids to take at one high school, and some I didn't. So the Indiana College Core money goes and pays the school for what a parent didn't have to pay for? Or is that really not relative to it? It was somewhere one institution, somewhere another,
Yeah.
some were AP, some were dual credit. I just can't keep it straight as to what the university's getting compensated for by the General Assembly and what the parents are compensating. I guess the higher institution.
Okay.
So this is an after the fact item. So this is once they've graduated, the school then the next year would get the funding for that. It's an incentive for the
It's an
school,
incentive,
for the
okay.
schools to provide these opportunities to their students at that
It's
point.
not relative.
It's not, yeah, it doesn't apply to the upfront funding on that one, and we can get more information on that.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to understand it.
This is encouraging because this gets a little bit at this issue of quality coming into the higher education system. Where high schools that focus on this could be real money.
Yeah.
That's an encouraging step forward from my perspective.
I think that's a great point, Commissioner Lamoth, and not only that, but to your point, Commissioner, by every measure, we know that students who are completing early college credit, be that dual credit or AP, the Indiana College Core and associate degrees, are more likely to go to college, more likely to persist once there and ultimately graduate on time. So it's a win really in every fashion, in our opinion.
And it's gonna reduce their overall cost of their education.
Yeah.
dramatically as well.
Big
That's
number.
right, yeah.
All right, House Enrolled Act 1160 is entitled Workforce Development Pilot Programs. And so there are several different provisions of this bill, some of which are centered on DWD. But there is one part that would impact the commission. So it would allow us to establish an education and career support services pilot program. And the program would have to provide college and university career support services specifically to adult learners, colleges and universities. However, the program did not receive funding during this biennium, but we are exploring potential ideas because we think that conceptually it's a great idea and perhaps something to pursue. We are looking through ways by which we could implement a program of such nature. All right, and House Enrolled Act 1449 for 21st Century Scholars. So I know there's been a little bit of discussion on this already, but we are enthusiastic, to begin this work, and it's really already started where the commission is required to identify and enroll eligible students into the 21st Century Scholars Program. Simply put, this is going to be a game changer for higher education in Indiana, and We're going to be starting that right away with our class of 2027. So this year's current eighth graders are going to be impacted by this change. And so Josh and I were looking at the numbers just the other day of, students who will be impacted in the class of 2027 and soon to be 2028 and 2029. Once we get that information in the following months, and you're looking at, I believe, Josh, about 120,000 students who will be enrolled, which is just incredible to see that. And I'm speaking from my experience as an outreach coordinator. I would say the several years that I was in Marion County working directly with middle school counselors and community partners to enroll students in the program, probably at least 50% of my staff time was engaged in that. And so we had 8 outreach coordinators, who are going to be able to massively focus their efforts on what goes on at the high school level and assisting students in understanding the requirements and ultimately earning their award. When you have the multiplier effect, looking at all of the great partnerships that we have with many of the colleges and universities in the room today, as well as community partners, the business community, we're really, really excited for the possibilities and potential with this. So our students are still required to meet, as I mentioned, all the high school and college requirements. And then also, I kind of skipped over, but one more piece I wanted to mention is that we must notify families of their students' eligibility. So notifying parents and guardians, and then also allowing them, if they choose to opt out of the program. So
what are going to be the mechanic? I mean, this is a big challenge.
yeah, so Josh is definitely the subject matter expert in the room, but we are able to now get that information in terms of students who are signed up for free and reduced lunch, which is criteria that we can use for eligibility for the 21st Century Scholars Program. Through a data sharing agreement, we can receive that from the Department of Education and thus ingest that into ScholarTrack and approve students who are eligible. One thing.
And it's going to be additional staff work. Did y'all get money to do that?
So for the actual auto enrollment itself, it will be some more work, but not a significant amount because it's uploading a file. It actually saved time for my team, Michelle's team and others would be answering questions and going out and trying to do enrollment events and things like that. So there will be some time savings on that. Going forward though, making sure that they were successful and just by having a higher volume, yes, there will be more need for us to support those students through the process. But the mechanics behind it, not that much more money. The big cost overall will come in it'll start in fiscal 28 when the class of 2027 graduates and we start seeing them matriculate to college. There were no additional funds for the program, but because of lower college going rates, we do have a fairly healthy rollover amount that we can access if we do need additional funding for items within the 21st Century Scholarship.
So let me understand this fully. Everybody is auto-enrolled, then you take your data, you match it, you identify who would be able to get 21st Century Scholar based on free reduced
We
lunch.
do that first.
Oh,
We figure out who's eligible for free and reduced lunch first. We upload that in our system, so we only enroll the students who are financially eligible because you have to be on free and reduced lunch. We then will mail all of those families a letter saying your student is eligible for 21st Century Scholarship. Here are the requirements. Here are what you have to do. If you don't want to be part of the program, you can opt out. Here's how you opt out of the program.
okay. So they still have to go in and file the form, parents.
No, the parents do not have to file the form at that point. No,
They do not,
no, they can opt out, but they.
but I mean, to be, for the funds to
Oh,
matriculate.
yeah,
they have
it's
to
senior
file.
year, they just have to do the FAFSA, yes, at the senior
Okay.
year, yes.
But, I mean,
And did it get reduced to the more simplified form
This fall.
already?
This fall will be.
So it's not that bad.
We'll see.
No.
They haven't unveiled it yet, but yeah.
but back to the 21st Century Scholars.
Yes.
I mean, really, I shouldn't worry about it, but you got 120,000 kids or families are going to get this, and at least 20 or 25% are not going to.
The way that it works is if a student will stay in the program if the family doesn't respond. They do not have to take an action. They are in the program.
They have to
Now-
take an action to get out.
They have to get out of the program. Throughout high school, the student will still have to meet the criteria So they'll start to do all the actions that we require them, and that will be where the counselors, the schools, and our team come out to make sure that they are completing the Scholar Success Program, meeting the 2.5, but no action to get into the program. And this will address, I think everyone who's worked with scholars has a story about a student who comes to you their senior year, whose mom or dad didn't enroll them. They have a great GPA, they got a great SAT, ACT score, but no matter what, they just don't have enough scholarship funding to go to where they want to go. So this will ensure that doesn't happen. Actually, one of the senators, Senator Melton, told his story about how he never took the form out of his backpack. So he did not get enrolled in the program whenever he was younger. So this will address that. Now, we'll learn a lot this first year, and there will be a lot of work to do, but we're really excited about the opportunity this presents for these students.
Now, be a little bit off topic, but not completely. So, from experience, some schools will say we have this institution funding that's available to your student regardless of need, because of your grade point average. And then that never happened. And from what I understand, it's because I still had to file the FAFSA. I would have had to have filed it to get that institution credit money, even though my FAFSA wouldn't have given me anything for financial aid. So that is true?
Yeah, for that situation, yes. Yeah, for the scholars, they'll stop to file the FAFSA no matter what. Then they would qualify for our aid, institutional aid, and federal aid.
So I guess we still need to press the FAFSA.
Oh,
We still need to.
Oh,
push
absolutely.
for-
Absolutely.
See, okay.
This is the upfront enrollment form, not the, not the
Okay.
FAFSA. So this is at 7th and 8th grade.
So, yeah, and I would add just a couple of quick points. So two different things we think very favorable. FAFSA will be required now for graduation, an opt-out provision. So so that's beneficial to 21st, right? That supports that. 21st, the child is automatically enrolled, and then the option, you have to take action to pull the child out of it. The 12 points, I think it is, scholar success. I call them the good student, good citizen checklist. Grades, college and career plan, staying out of trouble. Those things are still going to be required. A couple of quick things. You mentioned Senator Melton. I would share with commission members, I received more communication on this legislation, this session, like by orders of magnitude from people than anything else. And they were one of two things. This changed my life. This changed my family's life. Or I was not able to get signed up. My family dropped the ball, school did, etc. I couldn't even tell you how many people got a hold of me that I've never met, mostly through LinkedIn messaging and so forth. And then the other point, and I'm going to embarrass Michelle for a second here. We talked about the reallocation of resources. One of the things she has done since arriving in early September with our outreach coordinators is utilize the data. So if I'm an outreach coordinator in such and such area of the state, and I'm making this up, 80 high schools in my area, they're going to be using the data to say, oh, at that high school, I'm making this up, but their 21st century scholars have a 90% going rate. A statewide average of 81, that's good. Over here, they've got a 60% going rate. So where are we going to put our resources? Who are we going to go and say, how can we help you help your students, do a better job? But we've had some conversations about data today. She's already doing this with her team, better utilizing that data, being very specific about how we can go in and help, thinking of the kinds of things the chancellor was talking about with us at lunch. So that when those students are in high school and in college, they have higher rates of being successful.
So this is you can give me a short answer to this, but it might be worth a longer discussion, maybe a Pentagon kind of discussion, and that is, do undocumented students, so students who are not legal, can they qualify? Will they get auto-enrolled in this as well?
So they're not eligible for the program
For
at
the
this point in time. So the way that it does work is that if they were to get citizenship or become an eligible non-citizen, by the time they enroll in college, they would still be able to access it as long as they've done everything. But they cannot receive any funding unless they are document or eligible non-citizen or citizen.
So I'll provide some additional context. That's a very good question, Commissioner Member Jordan. So I think that our team has done a really good and intentional job in the past of making that widely known to not just our schools, but community partners, anyone who's supporting 21st Century Scholars. To Josh's point, in the past, we've been working with students who were DACA eligible. We would still enroll them in the program, but make it strongly known that with DACA status alone, they were not eligible. But if something would change, as Josh indicated, by the time, they were graduating high school, entering college, allowing them to have eligibility, they were eligible for the program. Now, that would become a smaller issue very quickly moving forward, just because of the parameters around DACA, one of which is when the program was established, and two is where that program is currently tied up with the courts. So, but it is something that we've discussed and will be, intentional in our communications, especially with this big change with auto enrollment.
Yeah, it's a real issue in this community. We've had 2 valedictorians at Portland Community Schools that were DACA and, couldn't get funding to go to college. There's a local organization called Latinos Count. Steve Corona, who's on our, yeah, he's awesome. But, he talks about trying to encourage 21st century scholars. And he said, there's always a number of the kids in a class like this that are like, I can't get it. What can I do?
Yeah. And Steve,
it's a tough question.
Sure, certainly. And Steve has been really great, actually with Padres Estrellas, which is our program working with Hispanic and Latino parents as partners. Fort Wayne is one of our sites. And because of that program, the ability to really get out the information at the neighborhood, grassroots level, much more effectively than we can as a state. They've done some great work in educating families on, all parts of the program, but especially apropos of eligibility.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the discussion.
All right, moving forward. So House Enrolled Act 1511 is centered on the Commission's military-based financial aid. So essentially impacts 2 programs or a program and then a bucket of programs that we call CBO or educational cost exemptions. So it essentially expands the National Guard tuition supplement grants and then educational cost exemptions to our private nonprofit colleges and universities. So the 29 ICI institutions. It does not provide full tuition as it does at our public colleges and universities, but that amount is capped to $5,000. And then also limits the educational cost exemptions change to students who are graduating this year, class of 2023 or later. Next, moving into the next generation Hoosier Educator Scholarship. So there were 2 bills that positively impacted the program, the first of which is House Enrolled Act 1528. So essentially, at its core, what this does is expands the next generation Hoosier Educator Scholarship to students who are enrolled in approved transition to teaching programs. There are about 40 of those available in the state, most of which are provided through our colleges and universities, but other organizations are approved on that list as well. And what that does is now allows the scholarship to be used for a one-time award of $10,000 for students who are enrolled in these programs. Now, the service requirement, as we've talked about before with this particular scholarship, remains the same, meaning that our students, after graduating with this credential, they are required to teach in an eligible school for 5 years beyond graduation. So eligible school can be traditional public charter, or accredited nonprofit in a K through 12 setting. For students who don't meet that service requirement, it does convert itself to a loan plus interest. However, it is prorated. So if you get a student who doesn't quite meet that 5 years, let's say they teach 3 years, we waive 20% for each year taught, so they would only be on the hook and paying 40% plus interest of that award. The second piece, House Enrolled Act 1637, increases the amount of the Next Generation Hoosier Educator Scholarship from what it was before at $7,500 to $10,000, and simultaneously removes the 200 recipient restriction that was in Indiana code. So we talked about this before, where there was leftover appropriation in the past that we weren't able to use because our number of recipients that we could select was capped. And the reason for that, we had a lot of students come in with significant, amounts of early college credit and dual credit and would graduate early. Usually about 25% of the students that we select are in college as well. And so they wouldn't use that full amount of funding to which they were eligible in the past. So with this, not only do we increase the award, but we'll be able to provide the award for additional students and continue to really be another lever to reduce the teacher shortage in the state of Indiana. And we've had some growing interest in the program. In fact, 600 students applied for this current application cycle. So we're excited for that. Additionally, I'll talk briefly. I know that Seth Henshaw mentioned this during his presentation. The bill also establishes the Next Generation Hoosier Minority Educator Scholarship as a parallel program. And as he had indicated, there is $600,000 provided to that fund each new year of the upcoming biennium. And then lastly, you may be familiar with the Erland S. Rogers Student Teaching Stipend for minority students that we provided the Commission for Higher Education. That amount, which was previously capped at $4,000, was incremented to $5,000. So we were excited to see that part incorporated into the bill as well. And with that, that concludes the first part of the presentation, and I'll hand it over to Josh for House Bill 1002.
Thank you, Greg. He used the screen, I used paper. Yes, this is the end of the day, so we go into where.
Dennis has a question.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, before we go, this is a good transition.
Back up.
Just going back to the president's presentation that we heard during lunch. Just want to make sure we're continuously putting, or don't lose sight of the whole issue of preparation. Make sure we're taking advantage of all the dollars that are being invested. So as we listened to the presentation at lunch, this was a situation where there wasn't people were in the university, but clearly the financial aid issue was taken care of, and yet we talked about these initial challenges when we came into the university. So the financial conversation is good, and that's important. But the holistic conversation has to always be there, and that is, what are we doing alongside the finances first and foremost? Where's the preparation that enables us to take advantage of these nice tax-funded resources that, again, allows us to get the great return on investment?
And I Commission Member Land, I think that's a really good thought as Josh dives into his presentation on House Bill Act 1002 and just all of the resources and support, including that bill, I think kind of gets to your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there are a number of items that pass this session at the K-12 level that addresses it. What we mentioned earlier, the general diploma change on that one, and then going into House Enrolled Act 1002. I'll cover each of the items, and Commissioner Lowry, I'll appreciate your input at any point in time during this process. This is the most significant bill that the commission will have dealt with since the financial aid reforms all the way back in 2013. House Enrolled Act 1002 expands work-based learning opportunities in college and career awareness opportunities at the high school and post-secondary students. And I'll talk about a number of programs that do this. I sent a pre-read out with, or Madison sent it for me, thank you, Madison, from the Capitol Chronicle that covers the timeline of the bill and how it happened. The reason I was up so late on that, I was wanting to watch the end of session, obviously, but also 1002 was one of the bills that was outstanding. It was changing quite a bit on the final day. I wanted to hear the author's interpretation of it. And honestly, it's just fun to hear legislators talk at 2 a.m. At its core, 1002 focuses on improving the connection between education and training post-high school and the workforce. It is really about that crux between what we're learning and how we're going to use that once we're done learning it, and kind of blurring the lines between the two. It also will require quite a bit of state agency interaction. We've already seen improvement on how we work with other state agencies, but this ensures that we work together intentionally and align our programs and initiatives. I cannot tell you the number of times just in the last 24 hours, I've been on the phone with DOE's general counsel. The number of text messages that I've gotten already while I was sitting over there, apologize for looking at my phone, just on this bill alone, because we know the amount of work that needs to be done and the amount of collaboration that will require. So without further ado, unless there's something you want to add.
Yeah, the only thing I was gonna add on that is literally some of the same types of messages while sitting here. And repeating what others have said to me, and I know have said to Secretary Jenner, the working relationship between our two agencies, I will say, is extraordinary. But part of what we have to understand as we drive for better success of students, how well they're prepared in K-12, how we integrate, how we blur the lines and so forth, is to anticipate a day when folks in these roles are not here. And how can we make sure that we're being intentional about this work so that, you know, we can set the table, if you will, and have that intentionality in the relationships and the preparation and the outcomes and so forth. But how do we make this something that's well past any, you know, individuals or groups of people? So that was a significant undercurrent to this legislation. I think it's fair to say by the speaker and others. I know Al was involved in this bill too, but yeah, that is worth noting.
So here's a quick rundown of the items that we're going to talk about within the bill. There are other items that are included. I just wanted to touch on some of the biggest items, the ones that we will be highly involved in. I'll also let you know which ones we are leading on and which ones we are secondary on as well. So just to get started, the first thing that House Enrolled Act 1002 does that impacts the commission is it transfers the administration of the Perkins funding to the commission. This funding was previously at the Department of Education. In 2019, it was the governor's workforce cabinet. And then now it is here at the commission. We have today with us, and I will point him out, Tony Harrell, who is the state director of education back there. Tony and his team will be joining the commission after July 1st. So we will have additional staff members who will be working with us, and we look forward to welcoming them to the commission. They award more than $30 million in funding to CTE districts and some post-secondary institutions, IVTED and SENS. And as I mentioned, this is their third home in 4 years, so hopefully this is their permanent home on the commission. Career scholarship accounts. I think this is the piece of the legislation that likely got the most press this session, and one that we're excited to be a part of going forward. What CSAs or career scholarship accounts do is it provides funds for students to cover items, costs of items such as post-secondary education and training, transportation costs, the cost of certification and credentialing exams while they're in high school. These are for high school students. There's a similar program right now for disabled students. This is a career scholarship one, so it's focusing more on the CTE program. Students may receive up to $5,000 annually in a CSA, and there's $5 million allocated for this upcoming fiscal year, and it doubles to $10 million in fiscal year 2025. This program is a true partnership across 3 agencies. The department will approve which programs, course sequences, modern youth apprenticeships, items like that are eligible for this funding. So which programs the students can use the funding for. So just to throw that out there, it's overusable. I'll use it again. Let's use a welding tech certificate or program. It's either offered at a career center or even offered potentially at an employer or even through a labor organization. The student can use the funding to pay for that education and training and costs associated with it. The department will approve those sequences. Commission comes in because we approve the eligible providers. So we approve who is eligible to offer those programs. And that is the role the commission will play within the CSAs. And those can be, in the bill, they list employers, intermediaries, and labor organizations in the bill. And we will be building an application process, but step one really is the department approving, which programs. The third part is the treasurer's office actually administers the accounts for us. They will be the ones that will, review the expenditures, that will work funds to, the providers, and monitor the use of that. Additionally, by 2025, the CSAs must be aligned, with a student's graduation plan. You may be aware that in 8th grade, you have to complete a graduation plan for high school. Whatever program you decide to use that for, it needs to be aligned with your future career goals. That'll take time to improve upon our current graduation plan and to build a process in where that can be reviewed on an easier basis by the treasurer's office and others. So with that, and we've already had numerous meetings with the department. I cannot tell you the number of providers who have already emailed me asking when this will be prepared, but we're working quickly on that. All right. The next item is what is commonly referred to as the 30-minute meetings. And this requires the commission to create a list of, again, you'll see some similar wording here, and I'll come back to the colleges and universities, but intermediaries, employers, labor organizations, and for this one, colleges and universities, who can hold meetings with high school juniors and seniors to talk about future career opportunities. Now, the colleges and universities on that list of 4 are only for the high school students. So they are not eligible for the 21st Century Scholars or the Defenders, and I'll talk about that here in a second. So every junior or senior will need to have a 30-minute meeting to discuss their future career goals. The idea behind that being, we've all heard how overworked counselors are, and this provides an opportunity for students to meet with individuals directly on the next steps on that. So for the high school juniors and seniors, they have all 4 options. For our 21st Century Scholarship recipients and our Frank O'Bannon Grant recipients, they have to do a 30-minute meeting with an intermediary, an employer, or a labor organization. Now, if you remember, a few years back, we were launching the 21st Century Scholar College Success Plan. It mirrored what we talked about earlier, the high school scholar success plan. We put that on pause during the pandemic. It did have a very career focus, and this will allow us an opportunity to make this a part of that process when we relaunch that program. And then finally, the Department of Corrections will be working with them, so offenders have this opportunity. They do have a program through DOC called, I believe, RISE, and any offender who goes through that program does not have to have a 30-minute meeting. Additionally, we'll talk about career coaching later on. Any high school junior or seniors who takes advantage of the career coaching opportunity does not have to have a 30-minute meeting. So the commission will be developing that list. We'll also be developing tracking processes for seeing how those meetings are done, and then what the results of the impact of those are. To give you an idea of the scope of this will require roughly 175,000 meetings next year. When you think of the 80,000 high school juniors and seniors, so right there is 160,000. We'll have even more when you add 21st and others.
Who pays for them?
So in the meetings themselves, there's no funding attached to it. There are, I'll talk about that. I think it's next.
Thank you.
Right?
Yeah.
So we do have the intermediate capacity building grants. This is funding for those outside groups to be able to come in and receive funding to scale up to do these 30-minute meetings. There's no ongoing funding for the meetings themselves. At the high school level, I can see this be a significant positive for our colleges and universities who are already in the schools right now, being able to hold those 30-minute meetings, talk with those students about their options as well. This will also allow for local employers to gain access, and others who do career advising who want to have access and want to help out with these students. But as of right now, if you do a meeting, there's no ongoing funding for an individual who holds one of those.
And are these one-on-one meetings or group meetings?
The group meetings can happen. I believe it is capped. I don't know if they took the cap out of the bill or not.
Up to 5.
Is it still 5? Yeah, so it's,
School day, school building.
yeah, 5 students at the high school level. So, yeah. To move into that, to help provide capacity for the providers under the CSAs and the providers for the 30-minute meetings, there is a one-time $5 million allocation in budget for the commission to award capacity building grants for these organizations. The amounts, each award is capped at $250,000. And we will be making sure that this has a statewide impact, not just a central Indiana awarding process. We need to make sure that these grants are used throughout the state. So we will be administering this grant as well to help scale up the opportunities for both the providers and the third. Some process that I don't think I mentioned, many of these items did come to us if you read the article on the last day of session on that. So that's why we're still working through some of the items on how we finalize. With that, we are also required to create a comprehensive career coaching and navigation plan. If you maybe you won't, but a few years back, the governor's workforce cabinet actually was charged with this exact item and issued a plan that some people in this room were highly involved with. And it moves this program over to the commission and puts in a grant process for the commission to award these. It is a partnership with the Department of Education, and we are actively working on how this one will play out. There is a lot of opportunity, I think, to weave these two together. So the career coach, or meeting the 30-minute meetings in these, because if you participate in the career coaching and navigation, you're not doing the 30-minute meeting at that point in time. So just make sure that every student will have some sort of access to information about options beyond high school. For awareness curriculum, on this one and for the rest of the items, we are secondary on the remaining items in this, but we will still be highly involved. This requires for the academic year 24-25, all schools are required to include curriculum around career awareness. The Department of Education, coordinating with us, will develop standards for the course. And then beginning in 2030, the course must be taught in 9th grade. So it does give time for that to scale up for us to work through what these look like. There are also, I didn't include in here, additional items about ways this program can be offered that are listed in legislation, such as virtual and other items. But yes.
So some of the schools have these programs. Can we learn from that? Because Lilly has funded a number of schools. East Allen County here in this area has that. It starts in 7th grade. They do curriculum both 7th and 8th grade.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Katie Jenner, is she familiar with that? Do we have to figure this out from scratch or programs we can?
I think I probably said it too many times, but our version of R&D is research and duplicate. So we figure out what's going well someplace and we come back and use that. It gives us a starting point. It's a little bit further down the road. So there's no doubt that we'll be looking at the success stories in the development of these items.
And Nancy, we have, I know Katie has, we have met with the folks at the endowment, for example, when they had that push. Some of us, as Josh said, were very close to that career coaching and navigation action plan that was submitted in June of 2018. I'll tell you the exact date. Right. So there is a lot of really good work that has been there that we won't have to go create again.
I was just getting a little concerned about how many staff members do you have to add to do all this? But if there's some roadmap already that we can R&D, which I'm writing that down, by the way. Can we get back in my life?
I stole it from Jason Beers, so I'm sure you stole it from somebody else. So with that, we'll be working with the department closely on this one, and we are still working on funding and yes.
Well, so this requirement was previously with the Governor's Workforce Council. So did they already have it?
So I'm sorry, I'm on the career awareness. So
Well, no, okay, so it is two different things.
Career coaching was with the Governor's Workforce Cabinet. There was a plan. Ultimately, it did not get implemented at scale on that one.
Okay, I was blurring the two together. Okay. So the Department of Education shall develop the standards for the course, but Lily's got a course, so you can look at that. But for the Governor's Workforce Council, so they had something, it just wasn't developed to scale. It's not.
Yeah, there was a plan. It ultimately wasn't fully implemented at that point. So we have a starting point, to go from with.
For both of them, but it's still taking on a lot of work.
Unquestionably, yeah. I think there is, within this, there is a ton of work.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of opportunity, and we're, the way that I'm approaching this is that trying to look at the opportunity we have in all of it.
It is great opportunity. Can you contract staff? Or,
We're working on funding for staff and how much we will need in terms of that, yes.
so you're getting in the weeds, okay?
Yeah, and
I-
with this is very high level. As we come
Okay.
back, you will see all of these things again in some sort of form or fashion in the months and years as we implement these. And it'll take a deeper dive on each of those items. We could probably spend an hour
Yeah.
on any one of these topics. So this is just the very high level. And unfortunately, for some of them, I don't have all the answers quite yet on that as we work through
Understood.
of those. But we will be working.
Can I add on to
Yeah.
what Pepper's saying? I couldn't agree with that. This would scare me to death. I mean, it's a real compliment to the commission, but it is a gigantic responsibility. And, you know, I think it reflects how highly the commission staff and board, to be perfectly frank, is thought of by the legislature. We can't afford not to do this well.
Yeah.
Very well said.
If y'all need more resources, then we've got to figure out how to get you more resources. I mean, the worst thing that could happen would be fail this. And I worry that you don't have the resources.
Well, and did the other departments fail? And that's why you have it. Or we,
I think this is, I just would make a quick comment, because I serve on a governor's workforce cabinet too.
okay.
And I won't answer that question directly, Kathy, but I will say that. No, I will say that this is kind of tantamount to my comments this morning, where I'm saying, if you look at what's going on, the Commission for Higher Education, for better or worse, whatever, we'll define that, is being pulled down a little bit into K-12. Maybe not K-12, 9th through 12. And also into workforce development. And that broadening is going to be a significant challenge that we're going to have to really pay attention to, both strategically and tactically, execution, and all of those things. There is, Alan Pepper's point, this is a very, very significant thing. It's going to take a lot of very careful strategy and work by the team. And we've
Yeah, I
got to
don't think
figure out
it's
how.
wrong.
No,
It's just different and it's a lot.
Well, Chris, do y'all have the resources to do this?
And Al, we are literally quantifying that as we speak. That's probably part of your messaging back and forth today, Josh. We have leadership teams on this, going through each piece of this, quantifying it from a human capacity, technology capacity, space, all of those different things. And we are literally quantifying the resources and funding that we need for, each piece of this.
And would you, I'm assuming
And it's
you're
great.
gonna need more funding, but does that mean you can't get it till the next?
No.
No, it doesn't.
You can get it.
No, we're looking at 3 different avenues right now for funding on additional staff and resources, whether that be, the workforce cabinet had money funded for, workforce initiatives that had an additional 7.5. That's one opportunity. State Budget Agency always has a post-session item where they review where agencies might need additional funding to do things that happen. And then there's always the So we are looking at all 3 and developing the best way forward.
And I would add to a point you made earlier, Al, because I caught it, and we would already have that on our radar. We will not hesitate to ask members of the commission for support in doing any of those things.
I mean, because the last thing in the world, we, as the board, want to see y'all fail.
We agree.
At the execution.
It's not an option.
Yeah.
Right. I'd rather you get too many resources and have some left over and then you give them back.
Yeah.
And this is huge. And it's not just one, it just goes on and on.
I know.
We ever stop?
3 more. But yeah, no, and Commissioner, however, I'm gonna steal that line and put on my board that we can't afford not to do this well. I like that. I think that's the way that we focused on this, in the last, few weeks of set, or 2 weeks of session has ended. It's been kind of number one focus at this point. Matter of fact, if you did not know, Greg, sure. All right. Put him in the spot, man. Greg will be having a,
I think I know what you're gonna share.
yeah, his first child, well, even with his wife would be having their first child here in the next month. And he's already informed me he's gonna send me, 1,002 pictures of the child. We've talked about 1002. Over the course of the time that he's out. So it is permeating every aspect of our lives, at this point. But we do look forward to the additional staff that we will be bringing, on to help with this. And you're right, this is a huge lift. And yes, I am nervous, so but we'll get it done.
But I mean, this is an unprecedented opportunity
Yes.
to coordinate a lot of bits and pieces that have been happening in some respect and pull it under the umbrella and the partnerships. And I think where I get more nervous is not that this group can't pull this off. I think they can. How do we design it in a way that's sustainable when it's not the three of you or the Michelle, or, how do we set it up in a way that there's processes and tools to keep it going? Because they might knock it out of the park, and 5 years from now, when, you've been tapped for national service because you're so amazing, how do we keep it going?
I think that's the way we approach anything that we're given. How is it going to be sustainable once the people in the chair shift around? And we've had quite a bit of shifting of chairs in my 9 years here, and I feel like the initiatives that had the biggest weight have carried on, and that we would hope that this would too. With that high school diploma redesign, this one requires the State Board of Education to work on, in consultation with the department. We will have a role in this as well. We will be, if we're not at the table, we'll be bringing the meeting and putting ourselves at the table, to discuss the new high school diploma requirements by, December 31st, 2024. So looking at, going back to what you were talking about, quality and others, what does the high school diploma look like? I think some of us may have been in the last round of this with the pathways and items like that. So, we will be working, with the department and state board on that.
So I just have to say, this is another very huge piece
Yes.
in that there's been a move for decades to lower the diploma requirements, and we're in a world war for talent and education globally, and we forget it.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be critical for our commission to really work to try to raise the standards, raise the requirements for the diploma coming out so that they're prepared for higher education or directly in the workforce development. And this by itself would be a major undertaking in my view. So.
And remind us, how many flavors of high school diplomas are there now? And is this going to add more?
So I can't speak to what will add or subtract that, but there is, for federal accountability purposes, there's one diploma with 3 designations. So there's the general, the core 40, and then the honors diploma.
Okay, there's only 3. Somebody told me they thought there were 6 now, and I think they're thinking of honors tech, honors academic,
There is a. There is a 4th, I apologize, I don't know.
Yeah.
What the requirements with that one, and what exactly are on that, so, but I think it might be helpful, in a future meeting, we provide you with a breakdown of that. State Board had a great presentation about, a landscape analysis for high school diploma requirement or graduation requirements across the country at their last meeting, so we'll see if we can't share that with you all. We can't, so we'll share that document with you so you can see that as well.
Hey, Josh, I want to say this publicly to our higher education partners that are here in the room. And this is something that you guys need to weigh in on. You need to pay attention to this because it's going to have a lot to do with your ability to complete your challenges in higher education and getting people to complete and all those other kinds of things. So this is something that I'm hoping that our higher education partners will partner with us on to make sure that we come out with the right outcome.
This one will ultimately, this is the graduation outcome report. This will ultimately impact Sean's team the most out of all of us. And what it requires, and these are just some of the items that, not all of them, but starting with the high school cohort that's graduating now, that we start tracking in an intentional way, the median income after graduation, participation in things like dual credit AP, post-secondary enrollment by major, and then employment by the commonly called the SOC, or the Standard Occupational Classification Code. So we can see the results of where our students are at, and it requires it at given intervals, 5-10 years out. This is a short list of all those, but we will be tracking this, or the Department of Education with the Management Performance Hub and the Commission start reporting these items. This is something I look forward to because I think it'll show, again, another way that higher education provides significant values for those who decide to take advantage of it. And then finally, the Teacher Higher Education Industry Collaboration Grant Program and Fund. And this one, we will work with the department on. It provides grants to teacher education. It says courses and programs, really programs. And these programs must be designed to engage teachers directly with employers and allow them to take what they have in the employment, learn from the employers, and connect that with their daily classroom lessons. So it's kind of that practical aspect of what the student's learning. Additionally, it allows for the improvement of a educator's content knowledge by doing research and working in or being involved with a workplace opportunity. This actually came to us from an individual outside of Muncie who advocated for it, and we got a meeting here in a couple weeks, and I'll share that later. Yeah. So with that, that has $1 million allocated in the budget for each year. And so with that, that's a small fry one for this. So, but with the rest, and I'm sure there will be some questions, but with that, we do recognize the lift that this is. We are taking it very seriously, putting the time into making sure this is done right, not rushing anything, but making sure our plans are out, are developed. And once we have more information on each of these programs, we'll be bringing it back to you to let you know, provide you updates, and also to get your feedback, because it is always helpful to hear your thoughts on what we do so we can improve on what we're working. So with that, happy to answer any questions that I can. Yeah.
Maybe just more comment and a couple of thoughts. I always say I could sit and just take notes on everything I hear and then probably become a billionaire. But I tend to do most of my time just really observing from my very bright comments. I mean that sincerely. But Chris says something that resonates with me, which provokes a couple of thoughts. Yeah. How is it that what can we learn from the past so that we don't continue to do it? So how do we find ourselves in a place where we're trying to heighten standards because in the past somebody thought it was a good idea to lower standards? And then when we come back and then say, what were those folks thinking? 10 years from now, will somebody say, what was the commission thinking? What? I mean, who thought that was a good idea? So yeah, as we think about not just diploma and the diploma types, I'm sure at some point there's a heart there, but it also seems like at some point when the heart starts getting full, then the mind starts shutting down. And so, yeah, what is the lesson going forward? So as we have more conversations, there is something that we come up with that makes sense for today, but it also makes sense in the future. Then I guess the second thought is just more so as we look at kind of whatever laws or policies we implement, you begin to see it begs the question, what is our response to a standard? Because typically human nature just tends to say, here's a standard, how do I conform? Or here's a standard, so now how can I get around it? You see a lot of young people suffering because the minute there was a standard set out around whatever the diploma type, then you have people who are saying, let me get to work trying to figure out how I can improve my GPA or how I can improve my 40 time from 4.6 to 4.2. But then at the same time, there's someone saying there's a standard, so now where can I find some performance enhancing drugs? Or how can I manipulate this system so I can look like my pass rates are greater than they typically are? So I guess it's point number 2 is, what is our response to a standard? Because there will always be those circumstances where whatever we set out in good faith, you could just kind of feel people saying, I'm going to find a way to get around it. And sometimes we end up buckling and we find ourselves where 3 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, you say, oh, all that time, all that effort, all that commitment, and we haven't moved an inch.
Well, Dennis, several of you have been on the commission for quite some time. Have the standards really been reduced for high school requirement? Or were they just not inched up as society needed them to be? Were they intentionally lowered at some point and I'm missing that, or they just weren't gradually increased as society evolved?
Yeah, well, I don't know. A couple of things come to mind first. Number one, with respect to 21st century scholars, it started out with a 2.0 GPA requirement.
Okay.
And there was even some request to increase the standard. Well, hey, that's high school. You're not setting people up for success. There was actually pushback against that. But again, there was no improvement. There was no growth. Ultimately, when you began to see the performance increases, when they began to institute requirements, performance. So they increased the GPA to 2.5. And that came with some pushback. But then you all began to implement also some scholar requirements. And all those things just kind of signal, yeah, here's the resources, but then here's the concomitant readiness that must come along if you want to be able to perform. And then, yes, with the whole idea of graduation waivers. So here was the diplomas, but then the waivers, but then even with respect to the waivers were there, but then there was this move to then say, how can I get around the waiver? This was intended for exceptional circumstances, but then how did everything become exceptional? So you go from 3%, a really rare circumstance where this is warranted, to 25% of your population, 30% of a school actually having waivers, and probably depending upon the school or a school district, so much higher. We know that, hey, as much as we love those young people, we're not doing them any favors. That's what I mean. What is our response to a standard?
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Well, I think what we found is when we do increase those standards and create the accountability, the results improve. Certainly the 21st century scholars, as we've refined that over the last several years, we've seen a dramatic improvement, the higher GPA, but also all those other prescribed, thresholds and benchmarks along the way, get clearly defined for them very clearly what they have to do. So it's there in writing, and we've seen the positive impact of that. So I would say, Dennis, and you're exactly right. We can't allow ourselves to let those standards decline. Rather, we've got to ensure that we set thresholds that are really meaningful and have the necessary, the proper impact. And it takes discipline and accountability, and we need to try to, circumvent those people that are trying to, find alternatives around, that accountability.
Right, and then you come along and say, now that we have these standards, yes, and here are these supports. Here is the tutoring, here's the counseling, so we can actually help you hit that higher standard.
It's those comprehensive and thoughtful ideologies that have prompted us to have to take on this additional work.
Well,
But that's good.
I just comment very quickly to Dennis's point. I'll give you an example where, for instance, we're all making decisions that I think, we've got to be careful about. So I personally do not believe that our education partners, that got rid of the SAT and ACT as measures of entrance requirement and went just to GPA. That's not helping quality at all. Most of us would agree that GPA really doesn't mean a lot depending on what school you're in or what the circumstances are. And somebody can come out with a 3.5 in one high school and a 3.5 in another, and they're completely different, whether they're prepared for higher education or not. There are decisions that are being made that I don't think serve our youth. And I think that we're seeing too many kids graduating from high school who don't have an opportunity to move into either a nice job with designation, ability to have a living wage, or move into higher education. The bottom line is we're failing. And if we don't do something about this in a coordinated fashion, and I'm excited, frankly, I'm intimidated, but also excited that the commission has a broader way of weighing in on this. If we aren't all serious about looking at what is the system actually producing, and is it acceptable for our society morally? And I think when you look at it, the answer is no, it's not. We're failing. And by the way, I'm the biggest failure in the room because I've been involved in K-12 reform and higher education reform for almost 40 years and almost nothing to show for it. So that's why I guess I sound strident in that there's too many generations every year of kids that were failing, that it's morally bankrupt. And we have to figure out how to change this in a coordinated way from pre-K all the way through higher education and workforce development. I think the way this is setting up, all of us have an opportunity to make a phenomenal, dramatic change that can separate Indiana from the rest of this country. It's going to take a long way. But I just think that's what we're called to. That's what we're called to. And I think we all need to kind of embrace each other and make those difficult decisions so that we're serving those people that are coming through our education system, either in the workforce development or into higher education. Anything less than way better than what we're doing isn't worth any of our time. So I am done today. I'm sorry. I'm way over my last 10 meetings I've spoken to this.
Chris, I don't know if you caught it. Michelle and I smiled when you said that. And the reason we did, our senior staff pulled me in if you think I'm misstating this. What you and others have just been articulating are the conversations our senior team has had extensively, and about the ethical, moral obligation we have got in this work. And I share that with you because we've also been really, I would say, fussy about who we invite onto our team. I see some of the new folks over there. So know this, I keep looking out at our team, they're smiling because these are the conversations we're having because we think this is our mission. And to have you all pushing us, encouraging us, pushing, prodding, pulling, we want that.
You know, the other thing that makes it even more challenging is in order to move the dial, we really got to overcome cultural barriers that have been in place for decades. I mean, you know, it's really that harder. Yeah, exactly. It's harder to reach the group that we've targeted. I mean, it's more challenging than your typical, you know, second or third generation college student. You know, I mean, we're trying to reach those first generation or low to moderate incomes, and there's a lot of barriers that we have to overcome culturally, financially, geographically. I mean, the whole works. It's right now. Challenge.
I was just going to make a quick comment about to kind of pull on that same thread on the importance of the partnerships that we have to implement some of these. I mean, I'm just thinking about that 30-minute meetings, which we need to come up with a better term than. That's not going to cut it. but you know, you can create this wonderful program, right? But in my limited read of it, then would it ultimately be our K-12 school systems and partners that have to provide the opportunity for those students, right? So they're gonna have to have a mechanism of saying, oh, who's gonna come in and who can do these in our building, right?
Yes, the schools will have to do that, and anybody who goes into school would have to be whatever the requirements to go in the door. So like for my school, or my daughter's school, you have to have a background check and things like that, so yeah.
So I'm just thinking about, you know, waivers and how things ebb and flow and sustainability and fidelity to the programming. That's a big,
Yes.
you know, figuring out a system that can be implemented, you know, in all parts of the state. And, you know, we'll just, a great opportunity. And can you do one other thing for me?
No, sir.
In your deck? Can someone explain how to get a 4.2 on a 4.0 scale?
I cannot explain weighted grades. We did not have it in my high school.
Extra credit. All right, well, Josh and Greg, thank you very much. Thank you both. Okay, okay, now, we're gonna move on to student success items. Now I'll ask Committee Chair Pepper Mulheron to provide a committee report.
Okay, well, our excellent leader, Dr. Stacy Townsend, has worked with us, and we have been engaged on a series of student success programs. And in April, our efforts were focused on supporting first-generation students. So the committee heard two presentations on the TRIO program and nationally recognized programs at Purdue, West Lafayette, Purdue, Northwest, and Indiana State. And the information is in the agenda packet on a one-pager that's been very beautifully designed, that has most of the information that you need to take away from that meeting there. But if you'd like to join us and become more engaged in our committee, we will be meeting again on Tuesday, June 13th from 2 to 3:30 Eastern time. And our focus will be on supporting the success of students in the foster care realm. And that's it for me, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Pepper. And for our next item, we have Michelle and Greg. They're gonna provide us with an update on pre-admissions.
Thank you so much. We have introduced this term a couple of times, but we are heavy into implementation mode now. And so we are prepared to give you a more detailed update today of where this program is going. We referenced it as pre-admissions in the past. It has the official name of Indiana Pre-Admission Your Path to College now. Greg and I have been co-leading this effort. There will be others who join us in this work, and certainly many across the agency that have helped with parts, but we're the primary communicators, at least for the launch of this for the class of 2024. So we are going to talk about exactly what the program is today. We're also going to share a little bit about some very key points and terminology that we want everyone to know if you happen to be out talking about this program alongside us. We're going to give a little bit of more detailed background on what you've heard so far about why we're implementing this initiative and the steps that we're going to take to get us ready to deliver these pre-admission letters for the class of 2024 this fall. Kind of what the timeline for that looks like, and then look a little bit ahead to what the future may look like for future.
Okay, so diving right into what exactly is Indiana Pre-Admissions, Your Path to College. So Josh and I talked just briefly about it during the last commission meeting. And so essentially what it is a statewide program that is being led by the Commission for Higher Education and in partnership with Indiana's public as well as private colleges and universities, which we will first kick off with the high school graduating class of 2024. So think of this important initiative along the lines of what Michelle alluded to as another tool in the toolbox to promote the value of higher education. It certainly ties into the wonderful work that's been performed already by our marketing and communications teams to better inform Hoosier students and their families of the wonderful marketplace of opportunities that we have for post-secondary education and training here in the state of Indiana. And then simultaneously alongside that, really deliberately talking about the resources to help make pursuing these options, whatever they might be, more affordable for our families.
So regarding some key points, we just want everyone to be on the same page. We have intentionally used the word pre-admissions instead of direct admissions.
when you hear this talk about across other states, and we're gonna share some information about other states here in a little bit, you will hear direct admissions used almost exclusively. And we are intentionally not doing that for two reasons. One is many of our campuses already have direct admission programs for specific majors, and we don't want to cause confusion with those existing programs that are already out there. But also, we learned from our good colleagues over in Idaho when they were implementing this, that sometimes using the word direct indicated to students that they might not have next steps that they need to take. And in one particular case, a student showed up on a campus having taken no extra steps, thinking that they could just show up and go. And so we want to make sure that we are very clear that there are going to be some next steps that students have to take advantage of this program and enroll in our post-secondary institutions. So pre-admissions is the language for Indiana. We also have a big part of this that we're working on with the post-secondary institutions right now is what we have been calling a list of caveats. And so our partners in this work have agreed to honor these pre-admissions decisions with the exception of a few mutually approved extra eligibility criteria. And as long as the students take their next steps to apply by those priority deadlines that the institution has set, and they meet those additional caveats as required, then our institutions have partnered with us to make sure that they find a good fit for them in their institution in terms of major or program. And so we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. And then also to just say, as part of this program and all the work that we do is we do at the commission define college broadly. We've talked a little bit about this throughout the conversations that are going on today. But we want to communicate to students more than anything through this program, all of their options that they have across the state. And that includes everything from workforce certificates all the way up to bachelor's degrees. And so we have a variety of institutions across the state that can provide all of those options. And so we just want to make sure that students know everything that is a possibility for them post high school.
Okay, and moving into the institutions with which we are participating for our inaugural year, they are listed on the board in front of you. And so nearly 80% of our public and private campuses will be participating here in year one. So we are very, very excited for that and just the strong partnership that we've had from both our public and private partners.
So what's the criteria? How do you determine a student's eligible for free?
So we will detail that.
Vary by institution?
It does. The institutions that are participating have indicated to us their specific criteria, which is based upon GPA and SAT or one or the other. So we'll talk about that in a little bit deeper detail here in just a moment. But I will share that when we started really brainstorming the structure of this program early on last fall, we had initially envisioned really a gradual approach in which we thought at the time, we'll work with our public institutions year one as we launch the statewide initiative, bring on our private institutions year two, and then year three would be dedicated to working with our online schools such as WGU and Purdue Global. Well, word got out about the work that we were doing. And so we actually learned that several ICI schools were exploring pre-admissions themselves. And so we quickly connected and got the word out to our private institutions. And on the board, we have 15 public campuses who are participating and 23 of the 29 ICI schools. So very excited for that.
I think a couple things I'll share just quickly to expand on that is our institutions now have the opportunity to opt in every year. So we have 80% participation, as Greg said. We do already have some institutions that have committed to coming on board with us next year. There's a few institutions right now that are going through some pretty significant leadership changes. They want to get their new leaders in place before they participate in something like this. There's a few that have pretty extensively detailed holistic admissions processes and want some more time to think about that. And then we do have a couple institutions across the state that do gender specific admissions. And we as a commission are not going to filter based on that criteria. And so we're having ongoing conversations about what it might look like for them to participate as well. And really to lead into kind of why are we initiating something like the pre-admissions initiative? Certainly a major reason why I was brought onto the commission was to address the college going rate. Everything that is in kind of my bucket of work with my team is to reverse the trend. And then we've talked significantly about graduate retention as well. We have some data from some of our other state partners who have instituted this work that we can share in the forthcoming slides about how they have been able to increase not only the college going rate, but keep their resident students in state through a program like this.
Right, and that's a great segue actually into our next slide as we talk about several of the partners we have frequently interfaced with who have already conducted this work to, start to build out this approach in Indiana. And so two of those examples are Idaho, which was actually the first in the country to implement their initiative, as well as Minnesota. But there are others such as Hawaii, Ohio, and I believe Montana, who are exploring these possibilities as well. And so in both cases, looking at Idaho and Minnesota, each state has seen dramatic increases in college going rates as a result of their models. Want to also add too that there's been nationally, I think, a trend towards either at an institutional level or sometimes at a regional basis for campuses paying third-party vendors to institute similar programming. And so an advantage to our program at the Commission for Higher Education is the scale with which we can launch this program and that it is truly statewide, which comes at a cost savings for our state and our institutions. So similar to what Michelle alluded to, I mean, it really gets to the heart of two major concerns about college that we have deeply explored, as I referenced to the College Value Campaign, about students and families not always knowing or understanding there are many choices of college and post-secondary options here in the state of Indiana. And then alongside that, concerns of affordability. And so we think we can address both through this initiative. So Indiana Pre-Admissions, Your Path to College, as I talked about, will not just create a better marketplace for this to happen, but access to the market for our students as they can envision themselves in a variety of opportunities throughout the state here in Indiana. And so lastly on this slide, Michelle talked about this, is that it's going to encourage early applications aligning with our institution's priority deadlines. And then FAFSA filing will also be a key component that we're reading into this initiative and talking about the breadth of state financial aid opportunities to which our students will have access by filing FAFSA.
Real quickly, as you advance, Michelle's an expert on this. You may recall that when we hired her, it was not only to drive a better college going rate, but better student success. And the last bullet point to which Greg referred, I think is really important. You don't have to go back, but it said also to encourage early applications. The chancellor spoke with us at lunch about the specific things they are doing. I recall from working with Mary Jane and others at Ivy Tech, we discovered 3 parameters in our analytics and from other institutions that were strong predictors of success. Early application and registration to an institution, signing on to the LMS, and getting their course materials. She would probably could tell you there was an 80-some% certainty as a predictor whether the student would fail or withdraw from the course or the semester. Just making the point, this isn't just about getting more students. Greg, you referenced this earlier, maybe you did, Michelle. It has actually been leading to these types of behaviors in the other states we've looked at. We'll monitor it, we'll press on it and try to make it better here in Indiana, but that's important in this process.
Yeah, and I think to share the possibility of what can come with a program like this, Minnesota is in their pilot year. They have released some initial data, but Idaho has been doing this. It was actually legislatively mandated back in 2015, so they've been at this for a while. And just in their first year alone, they saw an 8% overall increase in their college going rate across institutions, which they have far less institutions than we do across their state. But across their institutions, they saw anywhere from a 4 to 14% increase in the college going rate. It did benefit their community colleges and their version of regional campuses the most across those campus demographics. They also saw a 12% increase in the college going rate though for their resident students specifically, and 3% less students going out of state. So we really do think, just based off of the work that they've done alone, and that has been sustained, they continued over years since then to see increases to different types of institutions across their state. We think this is one of the things that will hopefully single-handedly at least move us in the right direction towards a better college going rate.
And Sean tells us that 8% of our students leave. If we could look up in a few years and see that that's only 4 or 5%, if they go here and then they have a higher likelihood of staying here, once they complete, we'll be pleased, not satisfied.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Lowry. So with the other states and what we've learned, I mean, there is ample compelling evidence for the benefits of this program, both in terms of access and then student success, as we mentioned. So we have a plan, and the next slide, we wanted to really bring you up to speed with the framework of the initiative that we've built. Starting with Al to dive into deeper detail on your question. So participating institutions will identify to the Commission for Higher Education their criteria for pre-admissions by May 26th. Many of them have provided that already, but that is the deadline for providing that information. It can be based upon 6-semester cumulative GPA and SAT, or one or the other.
So it's purely analytical and you have to accept the student, even if there's some background problems.
So to a large degree. Now, Michelle talked a little bit in detail about the specific caveats per institution. For example, when working with some of our private institutions, they do require our students to sign a statement of faith. And so we are being very intentional about defining what those are. They'll be described. We'll talk about the pre-admissions letter here in just a moment that our students and families will receive. And information will be labeled on the letter about that. But since there's limited real estate, we are also, in addition to that letter, creating a one-stop shop on Learn More Indiana, which is our family-facing platform, in which we'll have all the information about pre-admissions, including a detailed list where we're working on compiling that from our institutions on what those caveats might be. But that's just one example.
And I think to further elaborate on your question, we have asked our institutions to set the lowest possible criteria that they think that they can set to be able to accept these students. And so it will vary widely across the institutions. That is something different than other states that have got all the institutions to agree to the same criteria. So it does allow them to customize that to their campus, and they can alter that criteria year to year, depending on what yield rates from this program look like and other initiatives that they have on their campuses.
Yeah, so moving down to the second bullet point. So we talked about colleges and universities. With high schools, we have aligned the deadline for their participation for our first year to also be May 26th. This will be, again, optional for our schools to participate in, but we are very excited with the results so far. Whereas of this morning, the last time at least I pulled the data, we were sitting at 22% of our high schools across the state have opted in to participate. And there's still plenty of time, left to go for them to participate. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Who's the champion in the high school for this?
Yeah, so school counselors are our primary point of contact, but we have had a very strong multi-pronged communication strategy at this point, sending it to all active users in our ScholarTrack system. We also have lists, thanks to the Department of Education, of the superintendents and principals. And so predominantly counselors, but administration as well.
The form that they have to fill out to participate, they do have to acknowledge, it's mostly counselors responding, but they have to acknowledge that the principal has approved their participation and they've had a conversation about that. And after sending out emails to superintendents, principals, and counselors, we've done repeatedly, our outreach coordinators are also meeting with their school partners to get them to sign on for this.
And giving some detail as to why, we really stressed this opt-in process for our high schools for the first year. We had initially thought that like our SAT information that we're receiving by the Department of Education, GPAs were centrally collected, and we'll be pushing for that in future iterations. Unfortunately, that process isn't available just yet, but we are able to rely on ScholarTrack as a way by which to get GPA information for 6-semester cumulative GPAs for the class of 2024. And it is, a slight workload increase for our schools, and we recognize that, and that's why we built that opt-in process for this first year.
Now I would add, probably obvious, but we should mention that Secretary Jenner and her team have been pressing this information.
Absolutely.
Also, because they're in regular contact with superintendents and principals and so forth.
And want to provide just a little bit of additional context on this process as well. So although it is, as I mentioned, a workload increase, it's not a new process for our schools, because each year they are inputting graduation details for our senior students for 21st Century Scholars, and then students who have earned an academic honors or technical honors diploma for non-scholars. They also enter preliminary information for junior students. So that includes GPAs and diploma types for scholars. And so they're just going to essentially be reporting for the remainder of their junior students, these rising seniors, class of 2024. So that was the reason for that. Moving into the SAT file, so that will be uploaded into ScholarTrack. And as I referenced, we'll receive that from the Department of Education. And the commission will use ScholarTrack to match our rising seniors for this first class of 2024 to our institutions based upon the criteria that they meet for pre-admissions. And this will occur later on during the summer. I think this is still. So how will pre-admissions be admitted, just implemented, just some additional information. So our class of 2024 will receive a letter in August, which is going to explain the pre-admissions process and really introduce it to them. And then also prompt them to know that details about their official letter will arrive in September, and we predict that being received by families after Labor Day. In addition to students receiving that mailing, we think it's really important that parents and guardians receive a copy of that letter as well. The letter, similar to some of our other state partners, will be two-sided. The first side will have the institutions to which that student has been pre-admitted. And then very importantly, we're going to utilize the backside to talk about the free application for federal student aid and the state financial aid opportunities that we provide at the Commission for Higher Education. The last slide, I talked a little bit about the landing page, but the letter is going to direct students to go to that page on Learn More Indiana to, one, apply to the institutions if they choose to which they've been pre-admitted via the Common App, if the institution is participating in the Common App, or if they're not, to the institutional website. And then also we want to provide ample information about the 24-25 FAFSA. Okay, and following the distribution of letters, our institutions will receive a list of the students who have been pre-admitted to them, delivered securely to each individual institution. We also want to empower our school partners to really support and get students excited and motivated about their options. So our school users in ScholarTrack will receive a list of students with all of their pre-admissions decisions to help them, understand that, navigate, applying to the schools of which they're interested afterwards. And then last, Michelle's outreach team will also receive the list of students so that they're able to support in that process as well. This will all culminate during in September with the commission's one of our 3 college success campaigns, which is College Application Week. And also link up with priority deadlines. But something really neat about College Application Week is that many of our institutions that don't currently waive their application fees do so during that time period. So the commission's going to promote early FAFSA filing. In addition to this, with InvestAd, who is a great partner and works statewide with our team to help implement the FAFSA requirement as a result of recently passed legislation, Senate Enrolled Act 167. So we kind of see all of these different pieces, both a policy lever in terms of pre-admissions lining up with legislative changes as well.
This slide is the exact email that I got from one of our colleagues at Martin University in response to this. It was literally this, all caps, ... That's all he had to say. And it sets up the next slide for what I have to share, why I think this is particularly important for our state. Indiana is unique compared to all other states who are implementing. We can guarantee for this year that every senior at every participating high school will get a letter. So imagine with me that you are a student back in high school and you're sitting in class and every student around you got a pre-admissions or direct admissions letter and you didn't get one. That happens in other states right now. We can prevent that from happening in our state. Greg shared that when we are able to finally get GPA information from the Department of Education, there will be no more opt-in process for high schools. We will just do this for everyone. But because of the need for them to upload GPAs this year is an opt-in. But because of the institutions we have across our state, we can guarantee that every student will get a letter. And not only that every student will get a letter, but they'll get a letter with at least 3 institutions on it. So 3 of our institutions that are on the list of participating campuses have agreed to do open admissions through this process. And so every senior will get at least those 3 institutions listed, and then whatever other combination of institutions that they may qualify for based on those criteria that they match to. So we're just really excited about the possibility that we won't have to have students feel like they've missed out on an opportunity, but we'll also be able to communicate with students what all of their options are. Something that we've been making sure that we share with everyone as well is we are committed to communicating to students all of their options no matter what. So regardless of whether a campus is participating, on the landing page, every institution and how you can apply to that institution will be listed. And what all their options are to pursue whatever post-secondary option they want at those institutions. So we're hopeful that we'll get to a point where all institutions join us, but we'll communicate all the options to the students regardless, and do so as early as possible for them. So, for changes for the future, the big one is that our goal is to have GPA information through a centralized process. As soon as we get that, much like the SAT file, we'll be able to do this for all seniors across all schools instead of having to ask schools to upload that information for us. We also currently right now are going to get address information for every student across the state, which is why we're doing this via letters. We're working with the Department of Education to centrally collect email addresses so that in the future, we'll actually be able to release decisions via email in line with the institution's application cycles opening in August, and then follow up with those physical letters in September. And then what we're also starting about is how do we start communicating with students about this in ninth grade, that these letters are coming senior year, so that they can prepare as best as possible to have as many options show up on that letter as possible. And then some dreams for the future. We are having conversations right now with Common App about what a state membership with the Common App would look like, so that we can create a centralized process for students to apply through one application. So we're having ongoing conversations. We would be the first state to have a state membership with Common App. So it's something new that they are co-exploring with us, and we'll provide updates as those conversations continue. We also have had many institutions who are participating reach out to see what can we do beyond just high school students graduating and moving on to post-secondary initially that first fall semester. So there's been lots of brainstorming around what can we do for off-cycle admissions, for spring and summer admissions? How can we look backwards to capture some of the students who maybe didn't enroll during the COVID years, encourage them to re-enroll through some of these processes. 21st Century Scholars have a year after high school to graduate, or not to graduate, to enroll after graduation. And so many have reached out to us wanting to do something specifically to keep up with those scholars, to make sure that they enroll during the time period that they can activate their scholarship. Some have reached out to us about transfer students and what we can do through this. So I think the systems that we're building will provide a lot of opportunities that we can partner with our institutions on, and whatever capacity that they want to use the pre-admissions process to get students to come to their campuses through any of these ways. This is our current team. So as I mentioned, Greg and I have been kind of co-leading this. As we get this launched off the ground, Michaela, who's the new director of K-12 program implementation on my team, will be Greg's partner moving forward. Hillary, as our director of K-12 outreach, oversees our outreach coordinators, so they'll be out in the field with our school partners. And then we are actually participating in the Governor's Summer Intern Program. As an agency this summer, we will have 2 interns. Ashley, you can see on the screen here, will be working specifically on this program from us. She's coming from the University of Notre Dame. And then Allison back here will have an intern on her team that will specifically work with us on 21st Century Scholar auto enrollment communications. And the student that we're going to have, Reagan, is actually a 21st Century Scholar herself. So she'll be interning for that, for Allison's team this summer. And we are happy to take any additional questions that you have.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
Nice job.
Great job.
I think the only other thing I want to sign off on, I know not all of them are here, but we're just so grateful to our institutions. It's been overwhelmingly very quick yeses to do this work with us, and to help us figure out the participation that we have this first year. Especially like Greg said, we were thinking about a pretty long rollout phase for this, and we have moved very quickly, sort of unexpectedly. So I'm just so grateful to our institutions for partnering with us on this new initiative.
So everybody's gonna get an invitation from 3 institutions
That's
and
correct.
maybe a
Correct.
bunch more.
Correct, yeah.
Nice.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks.
That's great. Good. Thank you. Ed Berger's up next. Is someone going to report for the Academic Affairs and Quality Committee?
Are we near the, excuse me, are we near the end?
We're very near. So Ken, your presentation in Ross is very brief, right?
My pleasure, absolutely. The academic
Ken.
affairs.
We have 2 people that need to leave, so we need to vote before they
Yeah.
leave.
Okay.
I'm just-
Are you
Yeah,
to-
let's vote.
Yes.
Yeah, and as quickly as we can, Ken just said.
Yeah, a couple flavors of reciprocity. Let's see, there is a non-tuition flavor. That is the type where we have nursing, for example, licensure across states. So we have a nursing licensure compact with 37 states, including Indiana, that participate in that. There is SARA, State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement. That's to make it easier for distance education to be delivered across state lines. So those are the non-tuition varieties of reciprocity. There are also tuition varieties, multi-state. There's a Midwestern compact, which I'll explain in a moment. And that offers students a discount in tuition. And likewise, there are bilateral tuition agreements. We have one with Ohio, today's discussion, and another with Kentucky, which is not on the agenda. So briefly here with the Midwest Student Exchange Program, that's the one on the left, that's the multi-state variety. That covers both public and independent institutions. Students would have be able to take a program, enroll in a program at either at in-state rates or up to 150% of in-state rates. There are 8 of the 12 Midwestern MEC states, Midwestern Higher Education Compact states that participate in that. So the bilateral arrangements are on the right-hand side, those 2 columns. In all cases, we're just talking about public institutions. We're talking about only in-state rates, and we're talking about just 2 states in each case. The Kentucky resolution or agreement is not on the agenda because that's every 4 years. Ohio's is on. So these are the 8 Midwestern states. And finally, the advantages of reciprocity. Obviously, students get tuition discounts. States don't have to worry about if you have a small number of students who are interested in pursuing a program. You know, the institution doesn't have to invest and build a whole program. They're able to send students across the state line to where those programs are available. And then finally, institutions, to the extent they have empty seats, they can fill them with reciprocity agreements. Ross will quickly go into some of the details regarding the Indiana-Ohio agreement, which is actually the same as 2 years ago with 2 exceptions.
Okay, and I'll be very brief. I've got some beautiful notes here. People want to hear them afterward meeting. Okay, so there's basically 2 different changes, very modest changes. Okay, again, status quo, James Road State College would be excluding all the nursing programs from the agreement. And then secondly, conversely, the University of Cincinnati and the 3 other locations, or two other locations, the University of Cincinnati would be including their nursing and pharmacy programs in the agreement.
And Ross said that this is recommendation of staff to adopt.
Yes.
Right? And
That's
you would
correct.
seek a motion for someone here.
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the agreement is approved. We have 1 academic degree program for expedited action listed in your agenda book on page 47.
I'll move it.
There's been a motion
Second.
and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Programs are approved. Thank you. No more voting.
Sorry.
Yeah, me too. Appreciate it.
You guys get to go first next time.
I was just thinking that.
I would advise you stay and present the rest of your materials to this slide.
We'll
You can throw stuff at me.
All right, as we lose some members here,
Okay.
you have, you can find information items starting on page 49 of your agenda book. Is there any old business? Any new business? Any other comments from commission members, the ones we have left?
Just that there was a whole lot of great presentations made, really quality work, quality preparation. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Dennis. All right, the next meeting of the commission is July 13 in Columbus, Indiana. If there's no other business, we are adjourned.
Inside of that. Ohio. Dr. Sauer?
Ken, Pepper has a question for you. I think Pepper has a question for you.
Paula. So the nursing programs were included from some of the Ohio. Okay, one was Ohio, Ohio, not Ohio State.
Yeah.